I'd like to call this meeting, the Clay County Commission, to order. We'll start with our invocation. Teresa, if you wouldn't mind leading us, just make sure, and this is for anyone who wishes to comment as we go along. When you come up to comment, please make sure that the green light is on, state your name, and speak into the microphone and address the commission. Thank you. Please proceed.
I'm Teresa Lemming. Heavenly Father, I ask you to bless our commissioners with favor and grace, wisdom and insight. Lead and guide them in the way they should go to make Clay County, Missouri a great place to live, learn, work, and play. Strengthen them as they lead with vision and virtue. I thank you for your provisions. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nolte?
Here.
Commissioner Withington?
Here.
Commissioner Lawson?
Here.
Commissioner Wagner?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Here.
Next on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Commissioner Johnson.
Move to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion's been made for the approval of this evening's agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson? Yes. Commissioner Wagner? Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington? Yes. Motion passes 6-0.
Next item are ceremonial matters. Acting Administrator.
Good evening. We are here to welcome 8 graduates of the Fall Civic Academy. The Civic Academy is a program that began this year with this commission to help enhance our citizens' knowledge of the community and their county and how we serve them best. So I'd like to take this time to bring forward 8 of our graduates and have them be recognized.
Okay. I think the way we talked about doing this was to have all the commissioners lined up here. I'd go ahead and present it, and then we would all assemble down here for a group shot, if that sounds good to everybody. Well, you guys want to stand and kind of group in behind.
That way you can all be included in the individual photos if you wouldn't mind, and then
Sure.
have a group photo.
Sure.
Michelle Owen.
Don't let him block you.
Let's, okay.
Right there.
Everybody for here.
Actually, that's perfect. Thank you. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Ruth Emery.
Since graduation.
Thank you.
Pearl Watson.
Wait a minute. This is one I really want to be in.
Debbie Wells.
She had like some kind of degenerative disease. I'm not sure what it is. but some treatments have made a difference.
Oh, you get
Here,
a picture.
picture.
That way. This way, please.
That way.
Yes, please.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Verleen Gilkerson. Dina Love.
By the way, Natalie Shaw failed the class because she didn't show up.
She told me she missed twice.
I told you she's a loser. Said nobody
Oh,
fails
God.
Civic Academy.
Kim Nakamoto. Saif Mahdi.
So just a little bit, please. I'm sorry. And then thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, and this is our group, so if the whole group.
Oh, yeah. But I have to take over here.
This is the problem with getting bigger classes. I know. It's great.
Okay. Don't fall, Megan. Okay. 1, 2, 3, and one more for good measure. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
It was a good experience.
Got it? You all right? Okay, okay.
Glad you're on the job.
Thank you.
So are they going to do this comments or?
I don't know if he's going to ask me to speak or not.
Yes, yes.
Thank you again to all of the graduates who completed that program, and we will be having another class, and that will, I'm sure, be made public at the appropriate time, but we certainly invite citizens who are interested to participate in future classes.
Yes.
That brings us to public comments. Are there any citizens who would care to comment on any matters that they deem important? If you do, please come forward, make sure the microphone is on, the green light is on. Introduce yourself and address the commission. I see no one coming forward, so we will move right along to consent agenda. Acting Administrator.
The consent agenda allows the Commission to act upon items considered to be routine and approved in one motion. These may include items that have been reviewed by the Commission in a prior session. There will be no separate discussion unless a Commissioner requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately.
Commissioner Johnson.
Move to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Motion has been made for the approval of this evening's consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Lawson? Commissioner Wagner? Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington? Motion passes 6-0.
Next, we can move on to our regular agenda. There is one item, 2024-301, Administrator.
2024-301, approval of invoice payments for Clay County Prosecutor's Office for the period of October 12, 2024 to October 18, 2024. There are 9 payments in the amount of $5,138.41.
Commissioner Johnson.
Move to approve 2024-301.
Motion has been made for approval of 2024-301. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
Close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wagner? Commissioner Thompson?
I recuse myself.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington?
Yes.
Motion passes 5 in favor, 1 recusal.
Next on our agenda are reports. We have one item, Administrator.
2024 Capital Assets Inventory Review, the October 2024 from the Auditor, who is here to give you a presentation on the assets.
Mr. Auditor, when you're prepared, please go right ahead.
Thank you. Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. I wanted to go ahead. You've seen the report in your packet, but I also wanted to give a short presentation since we're here meeting this evening. So without further ado, this is the 2024 Capital Assets Inventory Review. This is something that County Auditor's Office is required to do annually, something that the county is essentially that we need to do. And what's before you, the report, is something I like to do to document that, in fact, the inventory has been done. But I just want to highlight that we have a number of other mechanisms that we do to complete a capital assets inventory and track capital assets, essentially by statute. Those items that are purchased at an original value of $1,000 or more, and then under county ordinance, as well as our recently adopted financial policies in your consent agenda, $500 or more for computer equipment. So this is from Missouri statute. So besides the report before you, we do a number of other things, and I give credit a lot to the hard work of my staff. But we've outlined 4 on this slide before you. Every year as part of the financial statements, we go through and look at all the accounts payable activities. And so we're constantly monitoring that, and then we do it on an annual basis to see what is an eligible capital asset. And so we add that to that list if it is in fact an eligible item. And as you can imagine, since we're spending over $100 million a year, there's a lot of material to go through. Second, every time we have a surplus auction or you have a trade-in, we had in the consent agenda, we had, how we're trading in vehicles. My office makes sure to go out at that moment and make sure we inventory the item, remove county insignia and our asset tag before it leaves the county's possession. That way we can remove it from our list. And this actually takes a good amount of time. Recently, I'll give you just an instance of that. We worked with county IT, and they got rid of hundreds of computers and other technical equipment through e-recycling. And so we went to the disaster recovery site, we went to the Schrader building, and when we have surplus auctions, it actually is a lot of work that we do for that number 2 part. The third one is essentially when we do the financial statements and we get a list of all of our capital assets, we divide it up by the departments, the offices, we send that to those offices and we say, please let us know any discrepancies. Let's do a decentralized inventory and let us know. This is the best way that I can get broad coverage of all the items the county owns, because let's face it, we have so many items that it becomes a little impractical for me to cover everything in a single year. So this is a good best practice way to get that coverage. And then finally, what this report is I do take a sample of our items and I go physically on site, and spot check to see if they are in fact there, matching the identifying serial number and the auditor or asset tag, so to speak. So I just mentioned that because this isn't, the report before you isn't the only thing we do. We do many approaches to make sure that we have good control over our taxpayer purchased assets, essentially, that we're tracking them and making the best uses of them. So beyond that, I wanted to give you some brief overview statistical information about county property. You can see here on the slide before you that we have about 8,500 individual items, 8,457 to be exact. Most of those items are possessed by the Road and Bridge Department, 38%, a little over 3,000 items. The next identifying office or department would be the Sheriff's Office after the kind of all departments together at a little over 2,000 items or 24%. So that just kind of gives you perspective of where are all of the county's items. Next, when we look at the original acquisition value of when it's originally purchased, not its current value, we can see that similarly, most of our items, as far as the cost of them, were purchased again by the Road and Bridge Department at 41%, a little over an original acquisition value of $90 million. And then next, you can see after all other offices and departments, again, it's sheriff and then parks. So that gives you a perspective. I think if I were to give you a reason why I'd assess that is because most of our road and bridge assets are infrastructure. Roads, bridges, culverts, things that cost a lot of money and don't really move. So that's really a good perspective there. Now let's look at depreciated value. So when we look at the accounting depreciated value according to our depreciation schedule, at the bottom there from our financial statements that the county has adopted, you can see that the original acquisition value, the highest percentage of asset class, so to speak, is from buildings, and then followed by infrastructure. But once we depreciate that over time through a straight line depreciation, it changes to where land is our top capital asset classification at 28% of the county's capital asset value, and then followed by infrastructure at 26%, and then buildings. You can see on the depreciation schedule, land isn't on there. It's because we don't depreciate land according to our accounting methods. And so that's a lot of the reason why. Whereas you have very short depreciation lifespans for various equipment items and vehicles. You can see vehicles depreciated very quickly from 10.3 million originally purchased to 3 million as depreciated, for example. So what? Why does this matter to the commission? Why does this matter to the taxpayers? The bottom line is we have about 220 million of taxpayer money spent to purchase these items. As depreciated, it's 102 million. Net of debt to acquire those assets, it's 87 million. That represents 64.3% of the county's net position or equity, how much the county is worth on the books of $135 million. This is not readily liquid for use, if we were to sell everything and, need to do that. And it doesn't meet dollar for dollar what it would go for on an auction, proceed or any other means of disposal. But it just gives you a sense of the county's net position and how much of it is attributed to the things we own and the things we use. So with that statistical background, I dive into what I actually did with this report. I took a small sample. I have a bunch of asset tags on hand, and I would like to get them out. We have assigned these, but yet they're not on the actual item. And the reason that happens is when an item is purchased, we rely on departments and offices to request the sticker once they receive it. And we have a form, and they fill it out, and we do that. Sometimes it doesn't always happen. When we then capitalize it as part of the financial statements, now we've assigned an asset tag number, and so we want to make sure it gets out on there. And so that's what this process was. For the last few years, I looked at 484 of those tags. Just given logistical realities, I picked 89 of a statistical sample in 12 departments. So it's actually, while it seems like a small list, it took quite a bit amount of time. It took a couple months and work from my staff. And, from that, we were looking at $766,000. You can see most of this, the highest value is in parks and the golf course, followed by the sheriff. But then the number of items, the most was in the assessor. And in the circuit court, I put an asterisk by circuit court because that included all sorts of departments like the courts, JIS, the circuit clerk, and so on and so forth. So what were the results? We, of those 89 items, we only didn't find one. It was just a computer, and we're still looking for it. If we do find it, we'll update the report. But at 98.8%, found rate, I say that's good. I don't see that as any indication of an issue. When you look at the procedures in place and then you statistically test it, that basically confirms that we do have good controls over monitoring our assets, so there's assurance in that respect. I did find 5 duplicates from those 89. We were aware of 4 of them. The inventory confirmed that. 2 of them, what essentially happened was we had purchases made on a quote, and that was gone through the system. When the invoice arrived, the payment was sent through again. The accounting system is set up to prevent duplicate invoice numbers, but if it's a different number, then you have an issue. So we have procedures in place to make sure we're looking and checking for that. This one got through. As part of the 2022 financial statement audit, my team did identify this, and we actually went to the vendor. They did not come to us, and we were able to recover $25,000 for the county. And so we found those duplicates and confirmed that they are in fact not there, and so that's how we removed that. We had a couple with information technology or IT. This was a situation where purchases were made on something called block time, essentially a prepayment to a information services provider. And then subsequently, the payment was actually made on an invoice. And so this was even part of the state audit. It was brought up about that, and we have procedures in place now to make sure we're accounting and tracking what's purchased and done with block time. But this audit identified that in fact it was just 2 items. And so, we were glad to confirm that. And then we had one facilities, it was a salt spreader, and we thought it was 2 items based on the invoice detail, but come to find out it was only 1. And so that's what going on site physically can do. We did have 3 audit tag numbers as well that had already been applied. So my team had sent it out, but then we reassigned a number through the accounts payable inventory process. So I actually would make recommendations to my own office as part of this audit in the sense that we have a log for asset tags being assigned throughout the year. We need to compare that log, which we have, but certainly it did not work in those 3 instances. Comparing the log to new audit tags being assigned through the capital assets process. And I'm pleased to say I've added staff to this procedure so that we're doing that. And in addition, in real time, we need to dispose of assets as they leave. We previously have been doing this at one time in the year. Now we're going to do it in real time as they leave. That way it's off and we don't miss it. But otherwise, I appreciate all the cooperation of county staff, offices, departments. They gave a lot of feedback on those lists that were sent. If it's a different location, if it's a different number or description. And so they're always a great help, and definitely the ultimate goal at the end of the day is to get as precise as we can on the list of our capital assets so we know where they are and how to use them. Beyond that, I assigned a 4 out of my 5-star rating because of those issues, but on the whole, I think a good thing. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Withington, I believe you are seeking recognition.
Hey, great information. Thank you, Victor. Hey, how do you guys keep track of software asset management? Do we have any software that requires licenses? Do you guys manage those? How's that documented?
It's a great question. We do capitalize it. We certainly do. We have a number of software systems in the county. You can think of the assessor software system, the collector's tax collection software system, the accounting system. So we track them and they are on our asset list. As far as the, classification, we do have, it would probably be more along the line of, one of those equipment items.
Okay.
Is how I would imagine we're going to classify those. There's also a new GASB standard, or Government Accounting Standards Board Standard 96, that requires the county to disclose in financial statements if it has a software arrangement that lasts longer than a year for a certain term. Interestingly, ours are a lot of perpetual licenses. So as far as that's a little tricky, but so we do track them.
Okay.
In other words, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Lawson?
Just wanted to say, as always, you do a completely thorough, understandable job on these things, so I appreciate the work that you do. Great report.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, as always, an excellent report. Thank you for the presentation. And as Commissioner Lawson said, it is always broken down into language that even I can understand. So I appreciate you bringing it to a level that is accessible to all of us. Thank you again.
And no problem, if I may, on a lighter note, less serious note, because I know I'm always pretty serious up here. This Saturday, for Commissioner comments, I'll mention to Commissioner Withington that the undefeated Navy midshipmen are going up against a team with one loss, unfortunately, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and it has a long history. In fact, it's said that the only reason this rivalry still exists is because Navy essentially kept Notre Dame afloat during World War II by providing a training program. So it's a great rivalry. I'm hopeful that Navy will keep the undefeated record, but we'll see.
Your expertise and breadth of knowledge is always great to see in action. Thank you again. With that, that completes reports, and we come now to County Administrator comments. Please proceed.
Just want to remind everyone, our next commission business session is here on November 7th at 6 p.m.
Thank you. That brings us to Commissioner comments. We will start, you know what? I think we'll start with Commissioner Withington because he may well want to have some comment on the previous comment. So Commissioner Withington, you have the floor. Please proceed.
So go Notre Dame, go Fighting Irish, and I would just like to remind Victor that Notre Dame currently leads the rivalry with 80 wins and 13 losses. So I feel pretty confident that we're going to win on Saturday.
Commissioner Lawson.
Thank you. The only thing I have to say is that as every month or every Thursday, as I go through our expenses, it just staggers my mind how much money we spend. And as I scrutinize that, there's things in there that I wish we could be a little more flexible on. Are there other sources where we can get things? How many of these things do we put out to bid? Do we look at other companies, or just because this is the way we've always done it, do we continue to use the same suppliers all the time? So entering this budget year, and the fact that last week we signed a pretty, it's been good and it's been bad with the feedback I've gotten, but mostly good, that we really are monitoring, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, monitoring our spending. We're focusing more on services that we offer for our not only our citizens, but also for our staff. And so that's where we're putting our focus, that charity begins at home. And so with that in mind, I hope that we more closely scrutinize in the coming budget how we are providing the services, where we get our services from, and is there a better way that we should look into that just a little bit more. Other than that, that's it.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Since we will not be here this week, I simply want to wish everyone a safe and happy Halloween.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Thompson? Commissioner Carpenter?
Thank you, Commissioner. So I want to wish everybody a happy Halloween next week as well. Hope everybody enjoys it. It's also, I believe, our last meeting before Election Day. So next time we meet 2 weeks from today, it'll be 2 days after the election. Hopefully we'll have a result by then. Who knows these days, though. And I guess I just want to say again what I said before, which is I love this country. I love all of you, regardless of party. You know, I feel incredibly blessed to be, through good fortune, born into this country. And not just this country, the greatest country in the world, but this country at this time, which is 80 years after the end of World War II, in which we are still enjoying the great good fortune of living in a time of world peace. There have been conflicts in the last 80 years, some around the world, some that our country has been involved in, but compared to the world wars and compared to a possible future world war, we've been very lucky these last 80 years. And I say lucky in that it's given us a quality of life that we ought not take for granted. But I don't mean lucky in that it just happened on its own. It took a lot of hard work across generations to make these last 80 years what they've been. I've described it before, and I will again, as the Pax Americana. For those of you who read history, which I would encourage more of, I think we should all do a little more reading. There was the Pax Romana, so this was the Roman Empire at its height, multiple centuries of peace throughout the civilization that it constructed. I believe we're living in what I would describe as Pax Americana, which is the last 80 years have been an aberration in world history. It hasn't always been this way, and we ought not take for granted that it always will be this way. And I say all this because, you know, in elections, we tend to get pretty fired up, and, you know, we see our differences between each other as being so big that they divide us, cause us to, you know, perhaps even have ill will toward each other on occasion. And just really want to try to dissuade that way of thinking. The truth is that we all have a lot more in common than we have that separates us. You know, we're all proud Americans. We would have all been proud Americans 80 years ago. And what united the American people 80 years ago and the values they stood for and fought for and died for still unite us to this day. We all still agree. My wife works for the North Kansas City Education Foundation. One of the things the foundation does is send a high schooler from each of the 4 high schools over to Normandy, France in the summer between their junior and senior year to, during the time of D-Day, to see and learn about that war and about the Americans and other allied forces who, you know, stormed the beaches and saved the free world that day. And it got me recently, I just, you know, like I said, we should all do some more reading. One of the things I did recently was go back and read our presidential addresses over the decades at D-Day on on June the 6th. And what I read President Reagan's speech, Clinton's, and Biden's, and Reagan's really stood out to me. You know, I think Ronald Reagan was one of our great presidents, a great American leader and a great world leader at that time. He had his imperfections, his biases, his blind spots, just like we all do, and did the job imperfectly, just like any of us would. But he was a great American leader at a time when the world needed one, and I really appreciated his words. And I'm going to read some of them now. I'm not going to read all of it because it was a long and great speech, but I would encourage you all to seek them out if you're interested. And one of the things I'll say about Ronald Reagan is he was a great orator, as we all know, and he put a lot of intention behind his words. He understood the power of his office, and his love for his country ran deep. And when he talked to the nation, he did so with great purpose and intent. And certainly on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, he chose his words specifically and wisely. Among other things he said, speaking to the soldiers who were there that day, "You all knew that some things were worth dying for. One's country is worth dying for, and democracy is worth dying for, because it's the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by man." He later said, describing the aftermath of the war, "There was first a great reconciliation among those who had been enemies, and real enemies, tens of millions of dead enemies, all of whom had suffered so greatly. The United States did its part, creating the Marshall Plan to help rebuild our allies and our former enemies. The Marshall Plan led to the Atlantic Alliance, a great alliance that serves to this day as our shield for freedom, for prosperity, and for peace. We in America have learned bitter lessons from 2 world wars. It is better to be here, ready to protect the peace, than to take blind shelter across the sea, rushing to respond only after freedom is lost. We've learned that isolationism never was and never will be an acceptable response to tyrannical governments with an expansionist intent." He later said, "We are bound today by what bound us 40 years ago, the same loyalties, traditions, and beliefs. And we're bound by reality. The reality that the strength of America's allies is vital to the United States, and the American security guarantee is essential to the continued freedom of Europe's democracies. We were with you then, we are with you now, your hopes and our hopes, and your destiny is our destiny. Here in this place where the West held together, let us make a vow to our dead. Let us show them by our actions that we understand what they died for. Let our actions say to them the words for which Matthew Ridgway listened, quote, 'I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee.' Strengthened by their courage, heartened by their valor, and borne by their memory, let us continue to stand for the ideals for which they lived and died." Thank you very much, and God bless you all. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Commissioner, for those well thought out and profound remarks. That was a very moving oratory. I appreciate your comments. I'm afraid now I have to follow you, and I cannot measure up to what you had just said, but I would just echo the fact that we do have the Halloween holiday coming up, and certainly we want everyone to remain safe, but still have an enjoyable time. Also, as has been pointed out, we have elections coming up. I would encourage all citizens to be informed and active voters. This is the important part of being a citizen. This is what our responsibility is as citizens. And as Commissioner Carpenter had outlined, many have given that last full measure of devotion to make sure that we have this opportunity. So please make sure that you exercise your rights as citizens of this great country. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.